Ein ganz, ganz herzliches Willkommen von wo auch immer Sie uns heute zuschauen oder zuhören. Es geht heute um eine neue Ära für Wissenschaft, Innovation und Forschung in der Europäischen Union. Eine Veranstaltung der Landesvertretung Hessen hier in Brüssel. Mein Name ist Marina Strauß. Ich bin Europakorrespondentin der Deutschen Welle und ich freue mich, dass Sie heute alle dabei sind. Gleich zwei Bemerkungen zum Anfang. Sie können der Veranstaltung entweder auf Deutsch oder auf Englisch folgen, je nachdem, wie Sie wollen. Wir werden später das Interview mit unserem Gesprächspartner auf Englisch führen. Wir fangen jetzt erstmal auf Deutsch an. Und noch eine zweite Sache, diskutieren Sie gerne mit. Wenn Sie Fragen haben, können Sie die gerne stellen, entweder per E-Mail. Die E-Mail-Adresse ist jetzt eingeblendet. Das ist streamline@lv-brüssel.hessen.de oder rufen Sie an unter der Telefonnummer +32 für Belgien 472030181. Wir starten mit einer Begrüßung von der Europaministerin des Landes Hessen, Lucia Puttrich.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, ich begrüße zu einer besonderen Veranstaltung der Hessischen Landesvertretung in Brüssel und ich freue mich, dass ich Sie gemeinsam mit meiner Kollegin, Wissenschaftsministerin Angela Dorn, zu diesem Thema begrüßen darf. Es geht um Forschung. Forschung ist für uns alle miteinander ein wichtiges Thema, sei es auf der Ebene der Bundesländer, sei es auf der bundesdeutschen Ebene oder der europäischen. Heute geht es um den europäischen Forschungsraum. Forschung ist grenzenlos. Forschung ermöglicht Perspektiven. Und Forschung muss mit aller Vehemenz vorangetrieben werden, nicht als Selbstzweck, sondern weil Forschung Innovation bedeutet. Hierzu müssen wir uns gemeinsam anstrengen. Das heißt, wir stellen als Länder Geld zur Verfügung, der Bund ebenfalls, aber auch die Europäische Union stellt Geld zur Verfügung. Am vergangenen Freitag hat der Forschungsrat darüber beraten, wie Forschung noch verbessert werden kann, wie der Forschungsraum aussehen kann und das immerhin im Rahmen von 27 Mitgliedstaaten. Forschung heißt Zukunft und deshalb sind Sie bei diesem Thema hier bei uns in der Hessischen Landesvertretung richtig. Ich bedanke mich herzlich, dass hier Herr Paquet zur Verfügung steht und darf das Wort an meine Kollegin Angela Dorn übergeben.
Herzlichen Dank an Lucia Puttrich für diese Worte, Ministerin des Landes Hessen für Bundes- und Europaangelegenheiten. Wir hören jetzt noch einen Input-Vortrag von Angela Dorn, der Ministerin für Wissenschaft und Kunst des Landes Hessen.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Kollegin Puttrich, sehr geehrter Herr Generaldirektor Paquet, sehr geehrte Frau Strauß. Ich freue mich sehr, Sie hier digital in der wichtigen Veranstaltung begrüßen zu dürfen und ein paar Gedanken zum Thema Forschung in Europa hier anbringen zu können. Wir sind sehr froh, dass wir in Hessen sehr europaorientierte Hochschulen, eine sehr starke Wissenschaftslandschaft vorfinden, die sich auch gerade in den Themenfeldern, die jetzt die EU-Kommission richtigerweise nach vorne gestellt hat, sehr viele Stärken haben. Das ist insbesondere die Gesundheitsforschung und jetzt besonders wichtig die Pandemieforschung, in denen wir sehr, sehr wichtige Netzwerke haben und wichtige Forschungsarbeit leisten. Es ist aber auch die Digitalisierung, jetzt jüngst mit unserem KI-Zentrum, das wir hochschulübergreifend und in Kooperation mit der Wirtschaft auf den Weg bringen. Und nicht zuletzt die Klimaforschung, die mir ein besonderes Anliegen ist. Ich freue mich, dass mit dem Green New Deal der EU wichtige Weichenstellungen gesetzt werden, wie wir die Krisen der Gegenwart, aber auch der Zukunft miteinander lösen können in Europa. Und deswegen ist es sehr richtig, dass beim Programm Horizon 35% der Mittel in die Klimaforschung gehen sollen, denn dies ist die Krise, die vor der Tür steht, wenn wir die Corona-Krise gemeinsam hoffentlich stark bewältigt haben. Es ist wichtig, dass wir es schaffen, dass wir in ganz Europa zeigen, dass die Energiewende nicht nur gelingen kann, sondern uns wirtschaftlich am Ende weit tragen wird und dass die Lösungen der Gegenwart und der Zukunft miteinander geschaffen werden können, sodass wir miteinander gestärkt aus dieser Krise herausgehen. Ein anderer Punkt, den wir gerade sehen, wie stark Europa sein kann, wenn man zusammenhält, ist die Pandemieforschung und die Forschung zum Impfstoff. Dass wir so weit gekommen sind, verdanken wir maßgeblich vielen Wissenschaftlerinnen und Wissenschaftlern, die in erstaunlicher Zeit einen Impfstoff miteinander entwickelt haben. Auch Hessen war hier sehr maßgeblich beteiligt mit der Virologie um Professor Becker herum. Ich freue mich, dass wir so weit sind und ich glaube, wir können alle daraus lernen, was möglich ist, wenn wir gemeinsam an einem Ziel arbeiten. Jetzt wird es Zeit, dass es auch mit dem Horizon-Programm vorangehen kann, dass der Haushalt auf den Weg kommt. Ich hoffe sehr, dass die Blockade durch Polen und Ungarn beendet werden kann. Und ich freue mich, dass das Europäische Parlament es geschafft hat, dass das Programm Horizon, was aus unserer Sicht noch gestärkt werden müsste, wir haben uns im Bundesrat dafür sehr stark eingesetzt, dass es zumindest in der Höhe gehalten wird. Denn tatsächlich brauchen wir jetzt die Forschungsvorhaben, wir brauchen jetzt die finanziellen Mittel, um die Lösungen der Gegenwart und der Zukunft zu treffen. Wir sehen es als Chance in Hessen, dass wir den europäischen Forschungsraum stärken und auch die Mobilität unserer Wissenschaftlerinnen und Wissenschaftler erhöhen. Und deswegen ist uns auch das Programm Horizon in Hessen von besonderer Bedeutung. Ich freue mich, dass die Landesregierung sich dafür entschieden hat, dass wir das Programm Horizon noch einmal durch Hessen insofern stärken, dass die Frage, wie hessische Anträge gestellt werden, nochmal mit einem eigenen Budget versehen werden, sodass die Anträge gezielt gestellt werden können, dass die Wissenschaftlerinnen und Wissenschaftler ihre Projekte auch tatsächlich so umsetzen können und so beantragen können, dass sie den Richtlinien entsprechen.
So that we have also the example of our regions, and I hope that we can count on Hesse for this and say thank you for your work. Please let's stick together for a common Europe in order to overcome the crisis in this moment. I'm sure we will manage. Thank you very much, Mrs. Dawn, Minister for Science and Art. Thank you very much for your words, for this new room of research.
A very warm welcome to Jean-Eric Paquet, who will be our interview partner today. I'm very happy to have you with us today, Mr. Paquet. Thank you very much for being with us. You're leading the Directorate-General for Research and Innovation at the European Commission, and you are really the go-to person when it comes to research and innovation in the European Union. You have years of experience, and so we're very happy to be able to talk to you today about this very important topic. So, Mr. Paquet, let's talk about money first. The topic that many people here awake in Brussels at night at the moment. We're talking about a package of 1.8 trillion euros, the 7-year budget of the European Union, and also the Corona Recovery Fund. But the problem at the moment is that 2 EU member states, Hungary and Poland, are blocking this budget. So what will happen to Horizon Europe if this deadlock is
Well, I'm not sure I want at this stage to contemplate this scenario, even if, of course, we need to start looking into it and prepare. If indeed there was no agreement found on the own resources decision allowing also the MFF to be agreed, this would no doubt delay the programs across the MFF, and of course also Horizon Europe would then be delayed, with, of course, consequences for our capacity collectively in Europe to deliver knowledge solutions, which on the one hand will certainly drive a faster recovery, where we want to build back better, a faster recovery along the green and the digital transitions, which are Europe's twin priorities, and where we believe that we need to repair our societies, reinvigorate our economies, and at the same time deliver these transitions. This is highly complex. This is policy work, economic decisions, citizens' mobilization across many different areas and sectors. And this therefore requires a lot of knowledge and also smart solutions, where indeed a research effort in member states at a regional level, at local level, but of course carried and structured also very much by a program like Horizon Europe will make a big impact. So delaying the availability of the program would indeed not be very wise. So I very much hope that the German presidency can find a way forward and allow these programs to move ahead. But like you are, I'm very much following political developments and have my fingers crossed for a fast and good outcome.
€4 billion more than what that government negotiated in summer. So that makes €85 billion total. That seems like a lot of money. What will this money be used for?
Yes, it's indeed a very, very significant budget. The Council and Parliament have indeed reached an agreement on the overall budget, with these €4 billion, which have been added in agreement between the two institutions. So it's a powerful program. I'm always told by my teams that it's the biggest research program in the world, and that's probably the case. But it's, of course, in Europe, one program amongst many others. And Horizon Europe has, I think, as a main purpose to help Europe come together collectively in delivering the knowledge and the solutions which I noted earlier on. And from that point of view, we will focus Horizon Europe on better science, on helping that the best science emerges out of Europe, as is largely and often the case already today. It's a program which should also allow Europe to be more visible, and European innovators to be growing faster in Europe. That's the second main big priority. And then lastly, and that's the very DNA of the program, it is about creating consortia, partnerships, bringing together in very concrete endeavors research organizations, universities, scientists across Europe. On the science part, what Horizon Europe will continue to do in large continuity with today's program is, of course, to fund the development of amazing research infrastructures, including to allow access of European scientists to these infrastructures. It then aims at allowing our younger researchers to move across the European research and innovation space, to develop their capacity to connect to other ideas and other teams across Europe. And that's the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Fellowship, which will be very significant and has been prioritized by member states recently in the budget discussions. And then thirdly, of course, the European Research Council, which is Europe's science flagship, where we fund every year the most amazing scientists, principal investigators, the most amazing scientists which come forward with their groundbreaking blue sky science and research topics. And we will continue to invest massively in the European Research Council. It's the biggest component in the program altogether. And I very much hope that we will continue to see the European Research Council show to the world that the best science is taking place here in Europe. I call it our Nobel Prize factory. Then on innovation, we of course are building on a number of items which existed before, and in particular the European Institute of Technology with the knowledge and innovation communities, which are available in many areas today already. We want to build on this to connect also our innovation capacity with our education efforts, and this very much also at the local and regional level. But the novelty then in that innovation part of the program is the creation of the European Innovation Council, the EIC, a little bit the mirror council to the European Research Council. So the European Research Council, the Nobel Prize factory, the European Innovation Council, the unicorn factory of Europe, if you want. At least that's how we hope to see it develop. And this is a program where we will be able in particular to fund deep tech innovators, so those innovators which are really connecting science with solutions for society, in AI, in quantum, in green technologies, in health-related technologies, on a bottom-up basis, but also in some cases with more top-down direction. And the idea is to make available grant funding, but also equity, to help these innovators grow faster, grow more impactfully, and obviously grow here in Europe. So the EIC is really the big new item, the new kid on the block, if you want, where we hope at European level to complement what is done so well across Europe already, which is seed financing, early stage financing. We have more startups in Europe than anywhere in the world. I don't think we know that. I think this should really be underlined. But we are challenged often at national and also EU level to help them grow fast, and this is what the EIC aims at supporting. And then, and I finish with that more briefly, and I'm sure we'll come back to it, is the central part of Horizon Europe, where we want to fund partnerships with industry, but also partnerships between member states, so that we can create synergies, but also critical mass in these partnerships, but also then in the more traditional Horizon Europe consortia, so that we can then find the technologies, demonstrate technologies, and have this very direct impact through our excellence on the green and digital transition. So as you can see, a broad ambition, but again, one which aims at complementing what is done in member states and structuring what is done in Europe, so that the program can really make a big added value and a big difference in promoting science, research, and innovation.
Mr. Paquet, you already mentioned many points that we will come back to later. I want to stick to you. You mentioned the EU is a leader in science quality. That is true, but also true, according to the Commission, that EU scores below US number of high impact, and also that China is on the rise. So is 85 billion enough? The European Commission yourself are part of it. At the beginning, actually 100 billion euros are needed for science, and also sometimes much more money is needed if Europe wants to compete on a global level. So what is your answer to that?
Well, my answer to that is that yes, of course, we are not alone. Yes, of course, there are many partners and competitors globally which are also investing in science, research, and innovation. And in some cases, they are indeed investing relatively more than Europe is investing. And we have, as I said, the best science globally is happening in Europe, not exclusively in Europe, obviously. There's a lot of great science in the US, for example, or in Asia. And China is today, in contrast to 10 years ago, an absolute major science player. And this will certainly continue to grow and develop into the future. So we need to find, on the one hand, right frameworks to cooperate. We have, I mean, science by construction is benefiting from international and global cooperation. Innovation is sometimes a bit more challenging, of course, because here you look also at economic competition, but science is by construct largely a universal endeavor. At least that's the way we see it rightly here in Europe. So we need to find the best approach to cooperate with partners around the world. And that's what we've been doing. And that's also what Horizon Europe will allow to do, notably with the possibility to associate countries to the delivery of the program. But then at the same time, it's true that this is also about competition, and we need to equip ourselves to be relevant in that global competition on the one hand. But as important, because global competition is, of course, a key benchmark, and so we must measure ourselves. But as important as that, I would argue that what should drive our collective effort in Europe is also the need to create critical mass to have impact. I think this was also implied in your question. And we will not have impact at national level in areas like artificial intelligence or quantum, for example. And I see a lot of willingness and also some very concrete examples of networks which are emerging, which are connecting AI research across EU member states, which are connecting research also on green solutions, on aviation, on steel. In many, many areas, member states, research organizations, universities realize that they need this European dimension to have the critical mass to in turn have impact with their science and their research on the challenges we are confronted with. From that point of view, yes, a big budget for Horizon Europe is impactful, very impactful in some cases. And indeed, the European Parliament argued for a budget of 120 billion. Initial analysis demonstrated that a very big budget indeed would be money well spent. Also, if you look against the success rate of the program up to now, there are so many amazingly good projects which are excellent, which we don't fund for lack of budget. So on all these accounts, of course, a big Horizon Europe budget, bigger than what is now agreed politically, could have been justified. But then again, we don't operate in a vacuum, and I think that the present budget is significant. And so the challenge now is that we with and beyond the Horizon Europe program, we connect with other components of the European budget. The Recovery and Resilience Facility under the Next Generation EU COVID-19 program is going to allow also investment in knowledge, in research, in innovation, in demonstrating new technologies. So we will really need to work, and this is happening across the Commission with member states to allow member states to do the right investments in the green and digital technology. And this will obviously be anchored in many cases on ongoing and future research. So that's one important link on which work is ongoing at national level and EU level. Another one is a regional policy instrument, which have allowed and will allow to invest into research and innovation capacities at national level, but also will allow. Yes.
I want to dig a bit deeper into contents of research and innovation. You you already mentioned it, green solutions. The EU wants to become climate neutral by 2050, and just praised the Commission and said this is actually good. More investment in climate solution is needed. So what are your plans when it comes to research in the coming years, looking at climate change and the Green Deal?
Yeah. I mean, the Green Deal, the Minister mentioned it, is indeed in terms of resources a top priority. I mean, across the entire EU budget, but also in Horizon Europe, at least 35%. In fact, we are largely doing this already in Horizon 2020, and my expectation is that this will increase further in Horizon Europe. And this really works across the entire program. So the European Innovation Council, for example, had a Green Deal call a few months ago, where we asked innovators to come with all relevant ideas to make the green transition, which is both climate and biodiversity environment, much faster. And we had very interesting projects on energy, on circular economy, on waste management, which I hope will grow, will scale, and will make an impact. The European Research Council, the basic science, be it climate science, transport knowledge, energy knowledge, is also extremely important, also on materials. And not to mention that a lot of that blue sky groundbreaking research might have applications down the road. So that's also highly, highly relevant, as is, of course, the work of our European research infrastructures to provide additional insights into science and then connect it to solutions for climate. But then the more visible part of Horizon Europe is also on the central pillar, the pillar dealing with societal challenge and industrial competitiveness. And as you know from the priorities of our president and of Commissioner Maria Gabriel, and of course also Vice President Vestager, we want to connect our industry policy and our research policy and connect it deeply to that green transition, which is Europe's growth strategy. I think this is never underlined enough. We had this paradigm shift with this commission, where climate policy, environmental policy, the Green Deal, is not just a policy in itself. It is also Europe's overarching strategic objective and the center of its growth strategy. And therefore, Horizon Europe will put a lot of focus and significant resources on partnerships which allow to deliver on that transition. I mean, two examples which are being discussed, or three examples I think which I should mention, is hydrogen, aviation, and steel. And they are connected, of course. Planes need materials, planes need new fuels, and hydrogen is a distinct option for clean aviation. And we are working with these industries to identify a common research and demonstration agenda, which will allow not just to continue, as we've been doing quite successfully, to improve the efficiency of planes or the progressive delivery of hydrogen solutions. Now, what we are aiming at now in Horizon Europe is really to make a breakthrough and push ourselves, so public institutions and industry, into finding the solutions for the 55% CO2 reduction by 2030 and pave the way for the longer term climate neutrality of the continent. And that means investing in research, allowing a range of aircraft to be available by, say, 35, to be then on the market by 50. This means clean steel technologies, which exist in part, but which need to be demonstrated at scale and then followed up with investment of industry to deploy these technologies by 2030 and beyond. And in the case of hydrogen, this is very much about continuing to work on the one hand on new technologies, electrolyzers, for example, to have on a greater scale green hydrogen, but also connect that research effort with the Hydrogen Alliance, which exists as well, where we are today discussing about deploying hydrogen solutions in society and in the economy. So all these are examples which of course connect to each other where we hope that Horizon Europe can make a real deep impact into that green transition, of course supported by the digital transition as well.
So climate policies will actually play a huge role in Europe and in research and innovation, but how will climate contribution be measured? Has the Commission put in place any indicators, or will it put in place any indicators to measure how climate is detected?
Yes, of course. Yeah, no, but you have already today a methodology which measures the climate budget, if you want, of Horizon 2020. I mean, we are largely over 30%. We are not yet at the 35%. We'll have to see when the 2020 budget is fully implemented, where exactly we will end with Horizon 2020, today's program. We have just now the very last call under Horizon 2020 is a Green Deal call. You're probably aware of that, and probably interesting also for our audience. So this was launched 1 billion euros, a Green Deal call across 8 or 9 policy areas. This was launched in September. It closes just after the end of the year. And we very much hope that with these 1 billion call, we will have another very significant impact in driving industries and society towards these green transitions. And this, of course, will count against the budget objective. We will continue to work as we finalize the preparations of Horizon Europe to have even more robust monitoring instruments. But what we also want to do, and I finish with that on that, is that of course we want to look at each euro spent and try to connect it then to these objectives. But more than that, what we hope to monitor is also impact and specific outcomes, not just money put into one area, but also we will try to monitor much more closely the broader impact of the program, which is not easy to do, but which I hope can then also continue to make the argument that research outcomes really benefit societies beyond the research done itself. And that's, I think, a very important dimension also.
Okay, we just got a question from Simon Marty, who is listening to us. I would hear how the associate countries, like for example Switzerland, from could remain part of the European research area when their association to the new Horizon Europe program would get.
Sorry, I mean, the stream was interrupted a little bit, so I hope I got the question right. So yes, I mean, today a country associated to Horizon 2020 is also part of the broader effort on the European research area. And I think this makes a lot of sense, again, against what I said earlier on. The program in itself is big, powerful, impactful structuring, yes, but it makes sense only against then what is happening in member states and between member states. And this is what the European research area effort is all about. So that logic of connecting association to the program with the policy development in the European research area remains relevant for, as we move forward, for Horizon Europe. Association discussions have not yet started because the program is in fact not completely available yet. As you know, the trilogues are happening nearly as we speak, and I very much hope, against of course the broader MFF and budget discussions, that we can have a finalized agreement between the three institutions shortly, allowing then also association discussions to progress. Again, because they make sense not just for association to the program, but then on a broader basis as well.
We have many researchers listening today, so let's also talk a little bit about facilitate their lives. For example, what steps can you take to facilitate EU-wide or the European Union?
So now I have a little audio problem. Can you just repeat your question, please?
Yes, sure. I can repeat it. That's not a problem at all. So we have really many researchers listening today as well, and so let's talk a little bit about what the EU can do for them. For example, how can the EU facilitate EU-wide mobility for researchers?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Within the European research area.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other question is what can researchers do for Europe? But that's in a much broader discussion, and one which is probably not at individual level, more at institutional level. I expect a lot also from universities and research organizations that they increasingly, and they do it, but that they even increasingly more try to connect each other and align and work together, which then in turn, of course, would also very much help the mobility of our researchers. I think here, I mean, there are many dimensions to that discussion. I already mentioned Marie Skłodowska-Curie and the European Research Council, but then also any major project will have a component of research and mobility. And I would obviously want to encourage researchers to make the best and most use of these possibilities, including when you look at the broader discussions in Europe of connecting national systems with one another. We have on the Horizon Europe also a major budget priority under teaming and twinning, where research institutions will work together to help excellence spread across all research and innovation systems. So that again, I think will provide a lot of opportunities for scientists and researchers to interact and work across Europe. So that's for the program itself. I think another important part of that discussion is also how we can promote more generally more homogeneous careers of researchers. That's a big topic between member states, because we can see that on the one hand, we benefit from a discussion of benchmarking, comparing good practices between research systems, but also a degree of consistency across research careers and research systems facilitates in turn also the mobility of researchers. And so there's a lot of discussion right now, which are very much welcome, and where we are trying to support it where we can, on the assessment of researchers' careers, including to start moving away from impact factors only, publication requirements only, which only tell part of the story in terms of the quality which you have as individual researchers. And we very much would want to also see a broader assessment of your role in a team, of your impact on more gender balanced or diversity relevant teams and research organizations. And then, of course, also how a researcher and his team can impact with the outcome of its science the challenges our societies are being confronted with. All these are elements which are often not fully considered, and where Europe, I think, could also have a useful contribution to the work done at national level. And last, in terms of mobility, I think, is the rather amazing ongoing work on European universities. I know that institutions in Hessen, and I think the two universities in Darmstadt in particular, are part of these European networks of universities. And I expect that this will also allow academics and researchers of these universities to be working across the network, and then give a reality to the effort done in these networks to create synergies and critical mass, making these universities, these networks of universities and their individual members even more impactful. So all these elements of research and mobility, which is, of course, at the essence, at the heart of the European research area.
Let's, for example, look at a specific example. A researcher from Frankfurt wants to spend some time in Paris for a research project, and then moves on to Warsaw. How can this researcher keep his or her social health insurance? How can the EU make sure that the person to have pension rights for all the time spent?
Yeah.
Like, any policy coordination to improve conditions for researchers in the EU?
Yeah. This is a very practical questions which you ask yourself when you move into such a mobility. And I know it from very close, having a family which is also part of the research world. and the question to indeed move to another member state for a while or for a longer period brings with it many questions, and even more so as you progress in your career, also if and when family is involved, and where of course then the gender dimension of research policy comes into play as well. I mean, on some of these aspects, there are European level elements which I think are important. I mean, firstly, of course, the Euro access networks today provide a lot of information across systems. Provides also a lot of information on the conditions applicable when you seek another position in another institution outside your own member states. And then for the pension system, one EU level contribution is the Resaver Pension Fund, which has been picked up now by about a dozen, a little less institutions. I hope there will be many more in the future, because of course that will then also make it much more impactful, which can be an element of answer if it is available in the institution in which you are seeking to move. But then there are also many elements of the legislation or the implementation of the legislation, which is very much national, and which is also very much linked to social or EU employment policy. And I think what you will increasingly see is also an effort which we want to do at EU level to make a better use of horizontal employment legislation and make this knowledge available also to researchers' mobility. And then lastly, what I just said, for alliances of universities, one of the added values we expect from these alliances is also that they tackle and offer integrated packages to their researchers to allow then effectively a very seamless mobility across these institutions. And we will certainly be interested and available to have a discussion with these universities to see how we can best contribute to that. And that applies, of course, to the education dimension, higher education dimension, but of course also then to the research dimension in these networks of universities. So that's, I think, a distinct new platform where hopefully we can make progress.
Unfortunately, we're nearing the end, and I would like to talk to you about two aspects from report, so we can also talk about both of them. One is academic cooperation with industry, because the European Commission is saying Europe is lagging into industry, and this also plays a big role in Horizon Europe. The second pillar actually focuses on it, and the Commission foresees technological roadmaps. Are these technical roadmaps accessible for all regions? Let's, for example, think about the regions in France, in Italy, and in Poland.
Yes, I think I illustrated it early on with steel, hydrogen, and aeronautics. I mean, public research, public funding, or research carried out in public research organizations, they need to be deeply connected to the research done with industry. And in some cases, industry can very well do its own research, and that is great. But there are many cases where indeed you need this a deep interaction, also because the investment in these research efforts is often, at least at the outset, beyond the capacities of individual industries, not to mention the need to have a broader framework where you have a clearer objective, longer term objective, including objectives which are set out in regulation to facilitate then investment decisions and research and innovation agendas being set out. So cooperation is, I think, a real necessity and a real added value on both sides of the equation. In that context, we are indeed promoting the idea of technology roadmaps which would better connect a twin discussion, one which is one of deployment of technologies, and I think here the example of hydrogen is a very good one. As I said, we have an alliance, a hydrogen alliance, which is today bringing together key players in industry, and looking at investment agendas, including by connecting the investment needed to produce hydrogen to the investment needed to distribute hydrogen, and then to some investment needed for the end user of hydrogen. And this alliance is, of course, going to be very impactful in the medium term, including in relation to regulatory and competition rules. So that's what is, in terms of deployment, available today, and also in a number of other areas like microelectronics, for example, or batteries. But at the same time, these immediate deployments need to be informed, and would most probably also, from the point of view of their relevance, impact, and probably also cost-benefit efficiency, much enhanced by having a very clear perspective on follow-up research and demonstration investments, which are then done at EU level, at least, in partnerships. And this is where technology roadmaps, which can identify key European technologies on a slightly longer term, then we would argue allows a much better combination of deployment and research investments on the one hand, but together with regulatory developments on the other hand. So we will certainly expect a lot of discussions, and I hope several of these industrial roadmaps to emerge in the next few years, again, because the green transition ensured by the digital transition will, of course, require massive industrial transformations, and those will require a lot of investment in technology, not only, but a lot of investment in existing and future technologies.
Okay, I would like to end with one important topic, and that is academic freedom. As you know, Hungary has the Central European University to close its doors, so it had to move from Budapest to Vienna, and the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, actually ruled that this Hungary violated EU law. So how will the Commission go up on this, or will it be hard? Just very briefly, sir.
Yeah, I mean, this is indeed an important development, the ruling of the European Court of Justice, because what it does is to say that the provision of the Convention on Fundamental Rights related to academic freedom can indeed be were interpreted as also impacting very specific implementation legislation in higher education, in this case, indeed, in Hungary. So there's now a ruling of the court which followed the analysis, the legal analysis of the Commission at the beginning of this infringement procedure, and it is now for Hungary to implement the outcome of the ruling, and obviously, as part of an infringement procedure, there will also be ongoing work happening between Hungary and the Commission. So that's for the very specific case which you mentioned, which is politically, of course, very important. But in addition to these key legal and jurisdictional developments, what I would also underline is that there is a lot of demand coming from member states. There was recently a ministerial event held under German presidency with Minister Karliczek, where most member states, and this is an ongoing process, signed a declaration on promoting, developing frameworks for academic freedom to be indeed fully upheld across the European Union and the broader European research area. And this, I think, is a particularly welcome development. As we will in the coming months, on the basis also of an agreement reached by ministers last week on ministerial conclusions on the European research area, as we now collectively, member states, EU institutions, including, of course, the Commission, we move ahead in implementing this vision for the European research area. We will also work on a pact, on a European pact on research and innovation, a European pact for the European research area. And my expectation is that we will, in that pact, also have a very productive discussion, and I think quite an ambitious outcome, at least seen from today, on values and principles which should guide the development of national and also regional research and innovation systems, and then of course also values and principles which should apply to the actors of these national research and innovation systems. So expect quite a bit of additional progress here as well in the coming months.
Thank you, Mr. Paquet. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for having taken this half hour to talk to us. Very interesting, and I think we could also talk about a lot of other points here, but unfortunately our time is over. Thank you also for everyone who listened to us and what tuned in today. Danke auch an die Landesvertretung Hessen in deren Räumlichkeiten.
Thank you very much to the premises of Hesse, and at the end I would also talk about two events. One is tomorrow from 1 to 2, the climate system in the crisis, political decisions, and then on Friday from 2 to 3 it's the new e-evidence ruling. Have a lovely afternoon, and I hope to see you soon here. Thank you very much.